Welcome. You're back in the war room. We're going to be doing some producing on the fly here. Rudy Giuliani is actually on a call, and we're going to join him momentarily. We're going to come back with Thomas King the third. However, here's the point I want you to take. You're in the war room. It's Saturday, the 5th of December, the year of our Lord 2020, is that things are changing. You're seeing momentum change right now to you see it in Georgia, the polling down there, 58% of the people in Georgia want a special session called. 53% of people down there understand there's enough malfeasance that it changed the outcome, at least now, of this presidential election. In Wisconsin, we just broke news, Jack Posobiec, the state legislature is going to have a hearing on the 11th in the state capitol to go through evidence, because the evidence that was provided by Reince Priebus and the guys running that lawsuit there was so compelling. Wouldn't know it from reading mainstream media, but it was so compelling of these 221,000 illegal ballots that now the state legislature is seeing the polling. It's seeing that people are sitting there going, hey, we got to get to the bottom of this, right? Something went on here, and we want to make sure this thing was free and fair. And now you've got in Pennsylvania, you've got people like the Amistad Project or the Thomas More Society, people like Thomas King III that are sitting there and going, hey, how did Mark Zuckerberg get into financing our elections? How did Mark Zuckerberg have a deal, these public-private partnerships that he's writing $10 million checks for? The next thing you know, you got a left-wing group like Rock the Vote, I think from MTV, right? A bunch of nefarious characters that all of a sudden they're directly tied in. They're hardwired into the state voter registration system. They're registering voters. How does that work? And people in Pennsylvania don't know about it. It's just like the consent decree down there on the signatures with Stacey Abrams. The deal cut with Republicans nobody knows about. Now it's all coming to light, and people are saying, well, hang on, this leads to big discrepancies. This is a way that you can do election fraud and voter fraud. Joe Biden has said yesterday they're having a virtual inauguration. You know why? Nobody would show up. 80 million. It's a joke. They are trying to hide under the cover of night, and we are not going to allow it. The heroes that listen to this show, watch this show, you're holding the line is what's allowing this to happen. You're empowering people like Phil Klein and the Thomas More Society. You're empowering that truck driver to come forward. You're empowering the people in Arizona, the 11-hour hearing that now we saw from Mark Fincham yesterday. You've got people coming out like crazy. This is empowerment because they know people have their back. We are not going to back down from this. The faux Biden administration, which is a joke, it will never happen. There's no heat on it. There's no one interesting vying for these cabinet seats, particularly the power seats of defense and state and treasury. The reason is they know they stole this, and they also know that we're going to show they stole it, and we're not going to accept that. Biden said in his first interview, yeah, I want Trump there. We got to shake hands, and he's got to smile, and then we're just going to move on. No. Under no circumstances should the President of the United States ever participate in anything regarding how they have tried to steal this. That's why I think today in Valdosta it's so incredibly important. So I want to go back to Thomas King III. Thomas, go back to the Zuckerberg. We've talked about this for months on this show when this thing was first announced. But you're the first people to actually take it to a court and say, hey, this is completely illegal how this was done and how this was hidden from people. This is what's one of the things that's so powerful about your suit is you're putting Zuckerberg on trial. You're sitting there going, hey, this is these public-private partnerships. What are these? We have an election law. You've got to get this stuff passed. You did it under the dark of night, and then you gave these left-wing organizations like Rock the Vote, you hardwired them in directly into the voter registration system in this state. It's outrageous. So walk our audience through exactly how Zuckerberg plays into this and why he's going to become a principal character in this.
Well, you got to start in the beginning, Steve, with Mr. Floof, who you know, David Floof is the brains behind this whole thing. So he's Obama's guy. He's Obama's campaign guy. And so Floof ends up working for who? Mark Zuckerberg and his wife. So Floof is the planner. Floof is the guy behind the screen. So Zuckerberg, of course, is keen to throw money in here. Zuckerberg, what do you think is going to happen in a Biden administration to Zuckerberg? Nothing. And so you got Zuckerberg throwing $400 million, the equivalent of all the money that the federal government put into the states to run their elections. So the money comes in through Zuckerberg. The money is used for all sorts of things. The contracts with the counties in Pennsylvania are just outrageous. The counties had to sign contracts that said that they had to do certain things. In Philadelphia, for example, it says they got to have 800 precincts up and running so they can get out the vote. And if they don't do that, there's a clawback provision that says Zuckerberg can get his money back. I mean, how in the world could government enter into a partnership to do something like counting the votes? It'd be like entering into a private partnership to run the military. You know, something that's as sacrosanct as voting. So just imagine if President Trump and his family offered to put up $400 million to pay all the people that were going to count the votes. Imagine the outrage on the other side. They would be they're at the top of their head off. And I got to tell you, this is exactly what they did in Pennsylvania. And they had clawback provisions. They bought these phony mailboxes to dump the ballots in. They kept us out of the counting room. They kept Republicans standing 30, 40, 50, 100 feet away in Philadelphia. People were trying to use binoculars to see what was going on. The whole election was as phony as a $3 bill, Steve.
Let me go back. I want to go to these mailboxes because the same thing's come up in Georgia where it's a signature. This issue of chain of custody. How can the Secretary of State or the Secretary in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the governor certify this when there's obviously a massive breach in chain of custody of these ballots? How could they still go forward? And how can no one in the legislature try to challenge this?
Well, members of the legislature have been members of parts of our suits. And so has Congressman Mike Kelly's been a real warrior on this thing. So the deal is with these boxes, with these drop boxes, I mean, this is just absolutely preposterous. Because so what our Supreme Court does, or we have a 5-2 Democrat Supreme Court. Every time we had an issue regarding this, the Secretary of the Commonwealth takes it to the Supreme Court and they make it okay. So the drop boxes have no guards around them. In Philadelphia, Mayor Kenny, the leftist mayor of Philadelphia, shows up. He tries to drop 2 ballots in at one time. You're only allowed in Pennsylvania to vote one time. You're only allowed to be in possession of your own ballot. They got Kenny on tape trying to drop 2 in, and just as he goes to drop them in, he sees that he's being videotaped. We got the leftist George Soros-supported district attorney of Philadelphia threatening people who are standing at these drop boxes to watch and see what's going on. He and Kenny are threatening people that they're going to have them prosecuted for intimidating voters. I got people in Delaware County calling me in the middle of the night. I got on the phone with the police because they called the police out because these heroes in the watchdog group in Delaware County, they were out there on their own time, on their own money, in their own cars, watching these boxes to make sure that nobody was doing anything nefarious with the ballots. They were doing it on their own time, and they were threatened. We actually had the district attorney of Delaware County in the courtroom in front of a judge saying that he would back off. He wouldn't go after these people, that they had the right to actually watch the boxes. I mean, are you talking about America here, Steve? This is not how elections are supposed to run. We had a great system. Everybody showed up. So you wanted to vote. You showed up to poll. You looked at your signature. They looked at your signature, and you voted. Now you show up at the poll. They look at your signature. But if you vote by mail in Pennsylvania, the signature doesn't matter. The date doesn't matter. The address doesn't matter. Nothing matters. And the other thing that they got going is they started looking at these ballots before the legal time to count them. So the big thing is exactly what you said. How in the world could the governor certify this election? How in the world could the secretary present facts to the governor that this thing could be certified? Especially with the story of the truck driver going on and the investigation that's underway by various agencies with respect to that. There's no way that this should be certified. So
okay, hang on for a second. Before we get to the truck driver, and get to that in a second. The legislature though cut a deal in 2019. In fact, Kelly's and Sean Parnell's suit, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Ted Cruz is coming in and saying, "Hey, this one's a winner. It ought to go all the way to the Supreme Court." That lawsuit, the Supreme Court didn't want to touch it on its merits, didn't want to get near it. What they said is that you should have come. You should have come sooner. How did the state legislature, controlled by Republicans, cut a deal that allowed these mail-in ballots? This was basically giving them the overall air cover that then the Zuckerbergs could come in and finance and do the check writing of $10 million to provide the execution. Rock the Vote and Zuckerberg are merely instruments to execute on an overall policy approved by the legislature. So how did that happen?
Well, so of course, the worst part of that story is that even if you had this deal that was cut and it went through the legislature and you had this system of mail-in voting, the system that was agreed to by the legislature is not what we ended up with. So this whole plan comes together. There's moving parts to the whole plan. So the last moving part is the parts that you don't like of this deal that you cut, Governor Wolf cut with the Republicans, included signatures on the outer envelopes of the ballot, dating of the ballot, validation of the ballot, and all of that got overturned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So if what you do is you cut this deal with the Republicans in the legislature, and then you back out on it. You go to the Democrat-controlled Supreme Court, and you get them to throw out the signatures. So signatures don't matter, dates don't matter, addresses don't matter. Almost nothing matters. And to make it worse than that, Steve, they violated Pennsylvania's election laws because they started processing these things in advance of the date that they're supposed to canvass them, and even the pre-canvass. So they buy these machines that Zuckerberg provided the money for. The machines are so sophisticated that they can tell the difference between an envelope with that contains only a naked ballot versus an envelope that has a ballot in an envelope. So they can tell whether there's an envelope inside or not. And when they figure out that the weight is different, that's how sophisticated they are. They notify the political parties. And when they started doing this before they got caught doing it, they're notifying the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party. And they're telling the political parties and the candidates to get a hold of Steve Bannon and tell Steve that his ballot's no good. Come on in and fix it. We got pictures in our lawsuit that show in Montgomery County over 2,400 ballots sitting on a cart out in the middle of the hall, unprotected by anybody, that anybody could have picked up and taken. And these are ballots that they wanted to fix.
Thomas?
So, I mean, this is...
Thomas, we got to jump for a short commercial break. Please hold on, because I want to get to the truck driver and to the investigation. So just a short commercial break. We're going to return. Thomas King III, the lead lawyer for the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society, leading this massive new lawsuit in Pennsylvania to get the facts on the table. It's happening, ladies and gentlemen. You can see by Wisconsin and Georgia, it's happening. Be back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Thomas King III, the lead lawyer in this new lawsuit in Pennsylvania, joins us. We're jammed for time. But Thomas, briefly, you dropped a bombshell there. You said that earlier in your interview, you said that the truck driver of the Postal Service trailer that's missing with the 144,000 to 288,000 ballots, we don't know exactly how many, but a lot, is now, you're saying that there are actual investigations going on from authorities. Authorities are actually investigating this?
Yes.
And he's one of the plaintiffs in your suit.
No, he's not actually a plaintiff in our suit, but he's referred to in our suit. His affidavit is part of our suit, and his testimony will certainly be part of our suit. He's one of the reasons why this election should not be certified, because Steve, what are 104 to 288,000 ballots doing in a truck in Long Island, New York, 1 hour away from George Soros' house?
Yeah.
What are they doing there?
What's the process? Where do you stand? What's the process of how you're going to get this through the courts in time to have this to make sure these electors are not certified?
Well, I've got the people out today to serve this stuff. So CSI in Pennsylvania, the Bill Hickman group is out serving the papers as we speak. And we're asking for a temporary restraining order, so we're seeking an injunction. We hope to get a quick hearing in the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg, and I think that we will.
Okay, we know you don't do social media, but we've got all the Amistad and the Thomas More Society. We'll put all that up for our audience. Thomas King III, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'm not a Zuckerberg fan, Steve. I'm not doing social media.
Yeah, not or Twitter. Okay, Thomas, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Trying to decertify the electors in Pennsylvania. A lot going on in Pennsylvania. We're going to deal more in that on Monday. I want to now go to Nevada. We're going to bring Rudy Giuliani on as he frees up. But I want to go to Brian Kennedy in Nevada. Brian, I thought it was a pretty solid lawsuit, particularly the evidence. The judge went out of their way, I thought, to to play smash mouth with the Trump team and the Trump lawsuit. Can you explain in your mind what went on?
Yeah, no, I think the judge was a moderate type Republican. He was appointed by a moderate Republican. He seems like a moderate guy. He was not going to go out on a limb and try to take seriously all this evidence, because there was 8 volumes of evidence. The evidence was overwhelming. If you go into any of that, you're going to have to overturn the election if you take any of it seriously. And so it was just a much easier job for the judge to dismiss all of it as inadequate and punt it up to a higher court. I think he might have thought he was doing the campaign a favor by being quick about it and trying to be nice to the other side by stepping on the lawsuit. So he was it was an odd but kind of expected punt by the judge.
Let's leave.
Now we'll go to a higher court. The appeal's already been filed.
Let's leave aside for a second the machines that you'll talk about in a minute. But I want to go to because you've been one of the guys. You got Laxalt, you got Matt Schlapp, you got Grinnell. You're doing both Nevada and Arizona for the campaign, kind of coordinating. What do you think in this lawsuit? Because we started in Georgia with the litany of things of illegal alien voting, of people not living in the state voting, of under 17 voting, just going on, and it rolls up to 100,000, illegal ballots or votes. In Nevada, for our audience, when you look at that lawsuit, what do you think is the 2 or 3 most compelling pieces of evidence that will eventually, either at the appellate court or at the Supreme Court, sway people's minds out there?
Well, the most obvious one was they scanned about 130,000 ballots, or excuse me, they scanned 130,000 mail-in envelopes with a machine that was not set to read the signatures adequately. In effect, it was that part of it was meaningless, and so those 130,000 votes, or some substantial percentage of them, were not checked by human beings the way they ought to. And so those votes right there are called into question. They did it on purpose. They were told not to do it by the company itself that produced the machine. And so those votes are very problematic. And when you go from that to just the overall management of the day of voting and the early voting and the lack of chain of custody of these thumb drives and these electronic components of the voting machine that are being called into question, not only in Nevada, but all over the swing states where you have these problems. The combination of those two things just simply can't be swept under the rug. This doesn't look like, you get this argument that we don't want to overturn the will of the people. Well, you're overturning the will of the people when you're not taking seriously the actual process where people vote. And it may not be the will of the people. It may be the will to power of a few thugs who want to take over an election. That's really what you're seeing both here and all over the country. This was not a fair election. And to the extent that we give it credence by hiding behind some idea about a democratic vote, we're not doing our republic any kind of service.
Walk people through the process as you see it with the appellate court in the court out there on this lawsuit. What do you think the timing is? What do you think the next step is? What's your people be looking for?
Well, I think we should get some response today or tomorrow. This is, of course, very expedited. Hopefully we'll hear something by Monday. The court was presented with, again, a lot of evidence here. There was an ask of the judge in Nevada in the hearing phase to look at the Dominion voting machine. We didn't get that. We got to look at the physical outside of the machine, but not the inside of the machine. And what you're seeing in Arizona and Georgia and elsewhere is the ability to look into the machine and to look into the software. Right now, the whole Dominion voting system that is being used in these swing states is a black box that has the ability to manipulate the data, to count the data wrong, and for there to be no serious way of examining whether this was voted on correctly or whether it was administered correctly or whether the software has any problems. That any serious judge is going to look at and think there has to be further discovery there. I think we're going to get that in Nevada. You're already seeing it in Arizona and Georgia. And so as these things start to break, if just one of them breaks, any serious judge is going to have to take that into account because the entire election is resting right now on Dominion voting and the lack of transparency when it comes to mail-in ballots. And these mail-in ballots, let's be clear, not only are the people not observing the signatures on them adequately in Georgia and in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Nevada, but when you actually run them through the machines, that itself is being done without adequate oversight, was not done with adequate oversight. And so this is an absolute mess, this election. And any judge who is being asked to rule on this has to take into account that this simply is so incompetent or purposely impotent that they have to either revote or throw them out or ask the state legislature to sit the electors. Because whatever transpired on election day and in the weeks and months ahead of time invalidated the results of this election. I can tell you in Nevada, Adam Laxalt, former Attorney General, who's chairman of the Nevada campaign, he was saying in the first couple of weeks, he and I were having a conversation about this, and you could see they were being flooded with mail-in ballots, and there was not adequate oversight of those. The Democrats knew in advance that the way to win this election was with flooding the system with mail-in ballots. And they were going to test whether or not the registrar of voters, both in Nevada and around the country, were up to the task of actually administering this the right way. And I can tell you, in most places, it was administered the wrong way. And for the first time, you have a president in Donald Trump who is willing to say, I'm not going to be cheated, and I'm going to ask for justice, and I'm not going to simply walk away. And the entire apparatus of the campaign is now in the business of making sure that this was a fair election. Not easy to do, and as you say, there'll be good days and bad days, but so far, I think we're in the start of getting real justice here.
You know, there's breaking news out of Creative Destruction. Todd Wood and team over Creative Destruction Media saying that certain patriots in Michigan have surrounded the courthouse in Antrim County to make sure people can't. They've been, they won a ruling to take, I think, seize 21. The Trump campaign to go in and seize 21 of the machines, the Dominion voting machines, and actually look at them and make sure these things are not wiped slick. So this Dominion is becoming now. We're getting into the court system. You're seeing the machines seized in Michigan. I think they're in court today to try to seize some in Georgia. You were out there. You already got the court order. Of course, they backed off because of proprietary software, which is ridiculous. But here's the good news, I think, coming out of Nevada also, Brian. You've got Jess Bannon and you've got Adam Laxalt, two top lawyers, one representing the campaign. Bannon was Sidney Powell's, I guess, partner on the Mike Flynn situation. Adam Laxalt is as serious as it get. These are hammers out there, and I don't see you guys backing down in Nevada. So what's your social media handle so people can follow breaking news all weekend, Brian, by you out there?
It's at Brian T. Kennedy 1 at Twitter and at Brian Kennedy at Parler.
Brian, you're doing the Lord's work. Keep grinding. Look forward to talking to you early next week.
Thanks, Steve. Look forward to it.
Brian Kennedy, one of the guys that is making it happen. Action, action, action. We told you this was going to be a grind. You've got the grinders. Take a short commercial break. We're going to be back with Mark Serrano in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Polling in Georgia shows that 58% of Georgians in a John McLaughlin poll want a special session to be called immediately to get to the bottom of what's gone wrong in the election for President of the United States. 53% in the Trafalgar poll, 53% of Georgians are saying that they think that illegal activity had an impact on the outcome. 53%. In Wisconsin, not just in the court system, but in the legislature, state legislature is now going to have hearings on the 11th of December. Why? Because of public outrage of what's going on. And how did that public outrage come about? It was Rudy Giuliani going around and taking basically a roadshow from Gettysburg to Michigan to Arizona to Georgia to put forward what we call the receipts, to put forward the evidence. And as people are seeing the evidence, they're going, hey, I don't know what Associated Press is saying, why this is baseless. I don't know why MSNBC is saying there's nothing to see here. We're adults. We can handle this. Let's look at what the facts are. Now joining us from Washington, D.C., America's mayor, the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Mayor, thank you very much. I know you're very pressed for time this morning, and thank you for joining us. I do a call in Michigan. Can you update us on what's going on in Michigan?
Well, sure. I mean, I just had a conference call with the representatives in Michigan who had follow-up questions to the hearing that we had the other day, and I was very impressed with how seriously they're taking it. I think they realize that. I think they now realize the election was stolen, and the question is. Can you prove it? And what do you do about it? I think the reason you see Georgia with 56% of the people wanting, not trusting the results of the last election is, I mean, you just have to look at that one videotape, and that's the whole election. During that 1:30 in the morning, hidden secretive counting of votes, they stole over 40,000 votes. They threw the Republicans out of the room. They locked the door. They waited, checked, and then they opened up this box that had been there for 12 hours, and they counted 40,000 votes. And he only won by 10,000. So you take those 40,000 away, don't do anything else, and Trump wins Georgia by 30,000 votes. That is about as clear a election theft as I've ever seen. It's like a bank heist.
Okay, but Mayor, you've gone through, and the way you had Smith, and I've played this 4 times now, go through the litany of 20,000 voters under 17, 25,000 illegal aliens, felons, boom, 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 just a whole litany. You've done it in Georgia. You've done it in Arizona. Why do we not have special sessions called by Republican governors in these states that could sort this all out in 72 hours? What is the holdup, given the fact that you've put the evidence out there? Public opinion is starting to change, although mainstream media is not covering this. Fox is not covering it. It's only alternative media like ourselves and others. But that word's getting out every day. Why are we not seeing Republican governors like Kemp, like Ducey, start to call for this. In Wisconsin, they're going to have a hearing of the legislature this week. And trust me, the reason they're having a hearing is because they understand that public opinion is starting to shift in this. Because people realize in Wisconsin, you guys have a bulletproof case up there. And so, but what is the holdup?
The case in Wisconsin is.
Yes, sir.
The case in Wisconsin is about as straightforward and clear a case as you can get. Wisconsin has the strictest absentee ballot law in the country. They, on purpose, want to make sure that absentee ballots aren't used to steal elections. And therefore, they require that you apply for it. It can't be given to you. They don't want people soliciting votes, so that you have to apply for it. And then that application has to be kept to prove that you applied for it, and some political hack didn't come around and fill it out for you. So now, when they check and they do their audit, there are some 60,000 ballots, I think it's about 60,000, where there's no application. The law is precise about it. Every one of those votes is declared illegal. And they were mostly from Milwaukee County, which means Trump wins, Biden loses. It's as simple as that. It's an operation of law, which also shows that in Wisconsin, just like in Georgia, where we had the middle of the night heist, the Democrats stole the election. And they had a plan to steal the election. The plan was to take advantage of these absentee and mail ballots. And when they had to put in phony ones, they'd do it in the middle of the night. In Michigan, you had a big truck show up at 4:30 in the morning with 100,000 ballots in garbage cans. We've got 3 witnesses to that, including a Dominion employee. I mean, that's outrageous. For that alone, the election should be overturned.
Your ability,
state legislature has the power.
Your ability with Bernie Kerik and the team to pull all this together under time pressure with limited resources has been amazing. But this week now we're going to have Mark Serrano on in a moment, one of the communications guys associated with the Thomas More Society, to talk about a white paper they've done to say, hey, safe harbor doesn't matter. Even the 14th of December doesn't matter. There's more time here. But given whether we got a couple more weeks of time or the 14th is a hard date, you're presenting evidence. Just walk us through how we actually get to a decertification process. Is it through state legislatures or is it through courts?
Well, Professor Eastman, who has been the biggest expert on this, wrote a paper, and we submitted it to the Georgia legislature to show them how they could do it constitutionally. In the paper, he points out that the Constitution provides the answer. The answer in a disputed election is the state legislature. The Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution gives the power solely to the state legislature to decide on the electors if there's a dispute, or at any time. They don't need the governor. They don't need the Secretary of State. They don't need the Congress. They don't need the president. It's them. It's theirs. As the professor says, the finger of responsibility has been pointed at them. They're the ones that have to decide it. They don't need a governor to call a special session. He has no power. He has no federal power. They could come together as a body, hold hearings as they've done, make findings. I mean, for example, in Georgia the other day, they had 22 witnesses that accounted for about 300,000 or 400,000 illegal ballots, as well as a smoking gun tape that plays for 8 hours, and it shows how the Democrats brought in these ballots early in the morning, hid them, counted ballots in front of people all day, and as soon as they got everybody out, and there was only 8 people left, they closed the doors, went under the table, got out the phony ballots, and started counting them. And they registered something like, I may be off a bit, 148 to 7,000. Biden for Trump. I don't even know why they bothered to give him 7,000. So that alone, based on that, the legislature says we make a finding that the election was stolen, that Trump had the votes to win, and we send Trump's electors to the Electoral College. Now, the Democrats could try to send another group, and that goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court will decide whether Georgia acted reasonably. And it will defer to Georgia if Georgia acted reasonably, because the Constitution says that the state legislature decides. It doesn't say the Congress, Doesn't say the governor, doesn't say the Supreme Court. It says the legislature decides. And we know this Supreme Court, for some time back, defers to the institution of government that the Congress has given the initial power to.
So is your point, you think so does that mean the state legislatures in Pennsylvania have now, they just said, hey, they sent a letter to the congressional delegation saying, object to the electors that Governor Wolf's certifying. Are you saying from Wisconsin to Michigan to Arizona to Georgia to Pennsylvania, it's the state legislatures that's got to get, that is going to be the final place this is adjudicated?
It's the best case for us in the Supreme Court, and it's the most true to the Constitution. The reality is this is a disputed election. The reality is there's a multitude of fraud in the election. We've got the 100,000 ballots brought in the middle of the night in Detroit. We have the closing down of the center, and it looks like a James Bond heist that's going on when they're counting the ballots. We've got so much evidence of fraud. This really has to be done by the legislature. The Constitution gave them the responsibility. Nobody really remembered that, but that's it. Our founding fathers are the best to follow when we're in a jam. We get the truest results. Whether people don't like it or not, we will be following how we were established as a nation to protect our liberties if we do it that way. But the only exception is probably Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a strict interpretation of their own law that would really award the election to Trump rather than to Biden because of those applications and their very, very special absentee law. So Wisconsin could do it either way. But the other states, it would have to be the state legislatures sending a slate of electors. And Professor Eastman feels quite confident that we would have the better argument before the Supreme Court.
Well,
and most of our lawyers do too.
We're 9 days away from when the Electoral College is supposed to meet. Can you just outline for us briefly the process of how you get to the Supreme Court, argue this, and then have it kick back to the state legislatures?
Sure. Here's what happens. I mean, let's take a state legislature like Georgia. So they held hearings for 3 days. They had about 35 witnesses. They now have in front of them, and maybe they'd want to add a little bit more, enough evidence to calculate that Biden lost the election. And they can calculate it about 4 different ways. All the ways that I gave you with illegal voters, dead voters, out-of-state voters, phony ballots that don't match, ballots that weren't properly inspected. Then the late-night video alone overturns the election. That was 40,000 illegal votes. That would mean that Trump won by 30,000 votes. So they have about 10 ways to get to the result. They should hopefully make that decision, write it up, put it in a group of findings, select the Trump electors, send them to Washington.
Right, but right now that's I know, but my point is that's not going to happen right now. Are you going to go to the Supreme? That's theoretically you're right, but that's all theory. It's just not going to happen.
I'm not so sure.
But do you
I'm
have?
Not so sure that Georgia and Michigan might not lead the way.
Okay.
I think they understand what their responsibilities are. I don't think they did when the week began.
Okay.
And I think the tape really changed the ballgame for them.
And you don't
see it on tape. It's very different than to hear me say 100,000 illegals voted.
And you don't
actually see them stealing votes.
And you don't think you need to take this case to the Supreme Court to have it authorized that they're supposed to get engaged? Because right now, Kemp doesn't look like Kemp's going.
We are going to do that too. We're going to do both, and we'll see which happens first.
Okay, Mayor.
We have a case we're going to bring to the Supreme Court, but we would rather get to the Supreme Court this way.
I know you're incredibly busy. I want to thank you for taking time and your staff for making time to do this here in the War Room. I know you've got a lot to go through today, and look forward. I'll talk to you this afternoon. But thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Good. Thanks, Steve. Thank you very much.
America's mayor, a true patriot and hero, the president's lawyer, the lead here, saying that it's the state legislatures, and they're either going to step up, like in Georgia and Arizona, or they're going to go to the Supreme Court and force it. Okay, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we get back, a white paper done that shows that we probably got more time than we thought. Mark Serrano will join us on the other side of the commercial break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Brian Kennedy reminds me from out in Nevada that John Eastman, the scholar that wrote the assessment for Rudy Giuliani, is a Claremont Fellow. We're bringing together many of the smartest people in the conservative movement to really put their shoulder to the wheel in this process of combating the Democrats trying to steal the presidential election. Now I want to bring in the president of Proactive Communications, brother Serrano, Mark Serrano. How you doing? Look, you're in a partnership.
Great.
You're the comms guy for Thomas More. Phil Klein and the team have just done such an incredible job. But this white paper, because what I was trying to get at Rudy is that, we're burning daylight. We're now down to the last 9 or 10 days. But this white paper says, hold on for a second. When you're talking about something like this, what are these dates and they really locked in stone? Do you want to just take us through what this white paper says?
Absolutely, Steve. Thanks a lot. So, look, the news media and what they're going to do. For weeks, they were saying there's no proof, there's no evidence. Now we know on Monday, the 7th of December, what they're going to do. They're going to say that Tuesday, the 8th of December, is the deadline for states to pick their electors. And they're going to say, game over. The clock's run out. So we knew at the Amistad Project, we knew that this is what would happen. And there would be pressure, tremendous pressure, Steve, on these state legislators to just accept the results, certify them, move on. And when there's tremendous proof and evidence that's come forward, especially in the past week, of fraudulent ballots. So set in stone? I don't think so. It focuses on the two dates coming up, the milestone dates coming up, Steve. December 8th, when states are supposed to pick their electors, and December 14th, when the Electoral College is supposed to vote. So, we gathered and said,
hold on. I just want to make sure the 8th,
not in the U.S. Constitution.
The 8th is considered the safe harbor. That's when it's all supposed to be picked, and they show up in the state capitals on the 14th. That's really the Electoral College meets on the 14th. Those are the two dates that are supposedly locked on. This white paper saying they're not locked in stone?
I asked a very innocent question. Where on earth do these dates come from? And so the lawyers, the experts at Amistad told me, well, there's only one date that is constitutional, one deadline. That's January 20th, when the president assumes office. That's it. That's the only deadline that matters in the U.S. Constitution. These dates come from a federal statute that was passed in 1948. Well, so you'd have to presume that a federal statute defining these dates supersedes the U.S. Constitution to apply them when there is great proof and evidence of fraudulent ballots across these states, Steve. So this white paper lays out all the facts, lays the history out from 1948 in the statute, and expresses and clarifies that those dates are not relevant. They are not, the media is going to use those dates, Steve, starting Monday, I think, to claim game over. And they're wrong. And these state legislators need to recognize that they are not subject to these dates. Let's take a look at some of the numbers, if I can, that we've got in the white paper, Steve.
Sure.
We've got, look at the difference, okay? Arizona, these numbers. Arizona, the difference in the vote was 10,000 votes, 10,457 votes, right? Based on the work of the Amistad Project in litigation in these states, 300,000 potentially fraudulent ballots may have been influenced the outcome in Arizona. 300,000 when there's a vote tally difference of 10,457, right? Georgia, the difference is 12,670, right? The efforts through Amistad and the litigation, the investigations on the ground, 200,000 potentially fraudulent ballots in Georgia. These numbers overwhelm the differential in the vote. So the dates are arbitrary. They are not bound by the Constitution. They're bound by federal statute, and that does not supersede the U.S. Constitution. January 20th is all that matters. Time is needed for these legislators to look at the evidence, call for deeper investigations. That's really what is necessary. The investigations that Amistad has conducted on the ground has demonstrated actual evidence and proof of fraudulent ballots through very varied means. Now it's time for authorities to take that information and go deeper. Find the investigations. Rudy Giuliani talked about the tape out of Georgia and showing them pulling out suitcases full of ballots. There are other cases like that. And frankly, I think what we need, Steve, and your audience needs to know, there are other people who saw things, who witnessed things, who suspected things, who may have been involved or may have been involved without ill intent on their own. And those people need to come forward. They need to come forward with their photos, their videotapes, or just their own testimonials, because now people know. They saw the tape from Georgia. They know that fraud has taken place. And here's what's interesting. You know, somebody asked me this question the other day, Steve. They said, well, how could a nationwide fraud, how could nationwide fraud take place and displace this election? How could it happen across the country? And I said, no. That's the point. It didn't happen nationally. It didn't happen across the country. It happened in many places, but primarily it happened in a handful of cities. Atlanta, Detroit, Philadelphia, Milwaukee. They needed to perpetrate fraud in those cities, especially assembling these massive, huge, consolidated ballot counting centers. Steve, do you ever remember seeing a massive consolidated ballot center before counting center before this year? No, we've never seen that before. That enabled fraud, and it happened in those cities. This is not national in every city, in every county, in every state. There's a lot of great patriots who ran our elections the right way, but in those cities, that's where it happened.
Mark, out quickly, how can people get the white paper, and what is your Twitter handle, social media, so people can follow you?
You bet. They can find the white paper at got-freedom.org. The white paper is available there. I hope they pull it down and take a look at it. You can find me on Twitter at Mark V. Serrano, Serrano.
Mark, thank you so much. Look forward to having you back early next week to talk about the media onslaught that says the game time is up, game's over, trying to make these arbitrary dates locked in stone. Mark Serrano, thank you very much from the Amistad Project.
Great, Steve.
Tonight, this massive rally at Valdosta, 6 o'clock, Real America's Voice and John Fredericks Radio Network will have joint coverage. Make sure that you tune in. They're going to do pregame at 6. I think it starts at 7. It's going to be a stem winder, I'm sure. Very important in Valdosta, Georgia tonight. We will see you back Monday morning at 10 a.m. Jack Maxey will have a thorough analysis of what went on with the guys he's been working with. Look forward to seeing it on Monday. See you then.